Good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Wilhoit, and I'm so honored to be standing up here after sitting in this congregation for some Sundays recently and getting to know some of you. Your hearts are open and warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful. Thank you. Also, I want to wish Happy Mother's Day to anybody who has ever mothered or received mothering, or given the kind of tender, loving care that a mother gives. I also want to say Happy Mother's Day to this earth that sustains us and nourishes us. So I am following two other people who have spoken to you in recent weeks. Gary, who talked about climate science, and Faith and Awe. And then my friend and colleague, Fran, who talked about action, antidotes to despair, attending action and action with others. And having listened to those talks and having sat in this congregation a few times and had many emails with some of you recently, conversations at coffee hour, and sitting in the book group last week, my heart said, talk about tending hope. Hope. When we think about climate change, we often think about all those actions we do out there, but there is a part of us inside that also needs attention so that we can do that work. This is why I want to talk about tending hope. Before I start, though, I just want to say that some of the things I'll be talking about today will be a brief overview because I have been welcomed to give a workshop. Your worship team and your pastor has agreed to let me come in June, on June 23rd, and give a short workshop after worship that will put into practice some of these things I'll be mentioning today. So if you're interested in creative nature-based practices and what that has to do with climate change, please put June 23rd on your calendar. Here's a quote to begin with by Terry Tempest Williams. "The world is all holy. We are holy. Daily prayers are delivered on the lips of breaking waves, the whisperings of grasses, the shimmering of leaves." So what is tending hope? It's a process. It's a practice sometimes. And it's an engagement with self and others. Tending can be known by or identified by some other words like caring, nourishing, nurturing, protecting, watching over, or giving one's attention to. Hope is a desire plus the expectation of fulfillment of that desire, which to me means we have to take action at some point. Hope for me is that inner spark that holds us and sustains us while we're doing the hard work out in the world. So you'll notice on the front of your bulletin, my new friend, a female bush tit. I took this photo on my deck about 3 feet from this beautiful creature. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. So one day, some weeks ago, just before the vine maple was about to leaf out, and you'll see in the image some buds, leaf buds, just about to pop open, I was doing my morning thing and I looked out and there was just a lot of activity going on. And like I often do when something outside of my home draws my attention, I dropped what I was doing and with rapt attention watched for the next 15 or so minutes as this flock of birds came and were quite quickly moving around on the limbs, the twigs of this tree that was about to leaf out, and I couldn't tell if they were going for the buds or the little flowers or quite what was happening. And then I realized, oh, maybe they eat bugs and insects, and so they're finding those guys on these branches and twigs of the tree. And after watching with rapt attention, I decided I probably should take a photo. So I got my camera, I took a whole bunch of photos. This is one of them. But I decided that I needed to learn something about these guys. I've heard of bush tits, but they're in naturalist language, we say LBBs. They're just another little brown bird. So they're hard to see. They are quite little. So I did a little research project, and here are a few things I learned. I learned that, yes, indeed, they eat insects. Okay, check, I got that. I guessed that correctly. They are social creatures. They are in flocks, and there were probably 3 dozen right there on this tree that literally I can touch as its leaves now are coming through the railings of my deck. They build a nest that's an incredible hanging nest. If you haven't seen a picture, you can go on our friend Google and find one. It hangs down, and they build it from mosses and plant material and spider webs. And they live in that nest, they sleep in that nest, 2 parents and all the chicks, all the nestlings, once they've hatched. Sometimes that nest is built by 2 parents and sometimes just by 1. What else did I learn? I learned that when the chicks, the nestlings, are still in their cozy little hanging condo, they actually are sometimes cared for by other mature adults, not just their own parents. To me, this says some amazing things about how we can tend hope with one another, for one another, and how we can work on these climate change issues that are so pressing for some of us. We do that in community. Fran was spot on when she said that a few weeks ago. We could have just stopped there. But let me give you some ways that we can tend hope for ourselves by building relationships with the natural world and also in community. So one way that we can tend hope for ourselves is simply by taking time to reflect. And I will give you some opportunities for some of these practices in June. Climate grief is real. Having lots of different kinds of emotions at once is normal. But grief can rob us of hope, so we tend to it and then we take action. We tend to our grief, we note that it's there, and then we do all the things that we know to do. We can also share honestly with others about how we're feeling, particularly on a walk outside. And we can find solace in the natural world. These are all ways that we can tend our emotions and move through the difficult ones and find hope again. Also, having a clear intention about how we're going to work on the issues that concern us is really important. And we pick an intention that's reasonable for us, that is within our capacity. I can give lots of examples of things I am unable to do because they're just too big or too hard, or I don't have the skills or the knowledge to do them. So we find a pathway that works for us because we each have a unique response to the climate change issues. We each have a piece of the solution. And so we find our way, and my way might or might not look like Fran's way. Or Fran and I might have something we do together and a lot of other things we do separately. We each find our own way. And we build resilience within ourselves. One way I know to do this is through gratitude practices. Again, something that we'll be working on a little bit in June at the workshop. Robin Wall Kimmerer says something about gratitude. Quote, "Sometimes in return for the gifts of the earth, gratitude is enough." And that doesn't mean we don't take action. It just means we can pause and be grateful for a moment or two. Kristen Lynn sums up this whole thing I think I'm saying about tending to our emotions as a way of moving to hope. A practice of gratitude is not about dismissing sadness, anger, fear, or confusion. Rather, it offers us the opportunity to see that we often experience multiple feelings at once, to welcome joy into the same places where we hold grief, to turn our attention to what is quietly growing and breathing day by day, which to our possible surprise includes ourselves. So how do we tend relations with the natural world? Who cares? What does that have to do with hope? My story of the bush tit is an example. I got great hope from learning a few things about one little bird species of the many who visit the plants and trees outside my home. We acknowledge the more than humans. That's what I sometimes call the beings in the natural world. We learn about their niche, their role in the natural world, their value. We see them as equals in all of creation. We become familiar with the beings outside our doors. How many times have you rushed to your car and passed grasses and plants and bushes and flowers and birds and squirrels and all kinds of insects, some we can't even see, forgetting they were all there in our rush to do the next thing? So can we slow down a little and acknowledge all those beings, become familiar with them, which we can do in so many ways: sitting, observing, praying outside. I don't know how many of you pray outside. It's pretty fun. I love it. Or meditate. Learning to ID the species around us, one by one by one. I didn't have a day where I learned bush tit and 18 other bird species. I learned that one bird over the course of 4 or 5 days, thinking of questions and then seeking out the answers, building relationships with the species around us. And then we extend compassion to the more than human world, much as we do to one another. We do this through kindness, through respect, and through supporting the natural world. When we learn who is around us in nature and what they need, it can help us focus our actions on behalf of the planet. Finally, we need to have hopeful tending of earth in community. So, service is hope-giving. If you've ever done a task, pulling invasive weeds or planting a native species, you might have felt that sense of well-being. Oh, I've done something. I've contributed. Serving is really important if we want to maintain hope, but also if we want to be putting our values and words into action. Doing these things in community has a repercussive effect. It ripples out. It's contagious in a really, really good way. And it's way more impactful than acting alone. Often we know what the actions are that we can take in regard to climate change, but there's also the who. Who do we join with? And I say we need to join these actions at various scales. We have our personal scale at which we operate. We compost, or we recycle, or we watch what we consume or how we consume. But there's also the community level. Maybe as a congregation, you have been doing things. This Creation Care series is one of them. The way I just learned this morning, some of the adornments in this beautiful space are about this Creation Care series. I didn't know it. I thought you always had a River of Life waterfall in the front of your church. It's lovely. And I want to build one now at home. We do things in community. That's the next scale at which we act. With our neighbors, in our neighborhoods, in community environmental groups. You're all welcome to join the Climate Circle if that suits your fancy. And then at the regional and national levels, we need to take action. And that sometimes can get tricky, but it can look like political action. It can look like supporting national groups or learning from groups like the National Audubon or finding your local group that's working on various initiatives. And finally, yes, we need to act at the international scale as well. I happen to be involved in a number of interfaith efforts that combine my passion for interfaith with my passion for the environment. One example is the Charter for Compassion. They have various sectors in which they do work. I happen to do a lot of work with them in the environment sector. Education projects, networking projects, actual hands-on projects in other communities, supporting a fruit tree planting project in Uganda was something we did recently. We didn't fly to Uganda, but we were able to connect with people there and support those efforts in various ways. The Parliament of the World's Religions is also another way. They have a lot of environmental initiatives. And then you may have heard in the first week of February of World Interfaith Harmony Week, which is an initiative of the United Nations. They have tons of environmental stuff going on. So at every scale, we can get involved in education, donations, many, many, many different ways. So in conclusion, no action is too small to be a starting point. One size does not fit all. We each have our unique gifts and capacities. Sometimes we step a little beyond our comfort zones to see if we're able to engage at a deeper level with climate issues. Doing action at different scales is doing more. And doing different type of actions is doing more, even if we do some regularly, frequently, and some occasionally. So let me end us with a little more John O'Donohue. Give yourself time to make a prayer that will become the prayer of your soul. Listen to the voices of longing in your soul. Listen to your hungers. Give attention to the unexpected that lives around the rim of your life. Listen to your memory and to the inrush of your future, to the voices of those near you and those you have lost. Out of all that attention to your soul, make a prayer that is big enough for your wild soul, yet tender enough for your shy and awkward vulnerability, that has enough healing to gain the ointment of divine forgiveness for your wounds, enough truth and vigor to challenge your blindness and complacency, enough graciousness and vision to mirror your immortal beauty. Write a prayer that is worthy of the destiny to which you have been called. Thank you.